Back in March I released a video called I Tried to Get Good at Dark Souls. It was a follow-up to my Dark Souls in 2024 video, and the title is pretty self-explanatory. I wanted to get comfortable at playing a game which is notoriously difficult and that I'd never really clicked with. A simple enough premise, and the video ended up being one of the ones I'm most proud of on the entire channel. Whether or not I truly got good was left down to interpretation, as I ended up quitting the game after reaching the depths, and was no longer enjoying myself that much. And that was where I planned to leave things with Dark Souls. But then, this happened.
Hello folks, welcome back. It's Dark Souls with all the items and enemies and bosses randomised.
This is Luke Westerway, previously of Outside Extra, but he recently left that channel and started up his own one, Normal Adult Luke. As a fan of his, I obviously wanted to check out anything he was making, so I watched the first episode of a Dark Souls randomizer. And my god, was it amazing. Not only is the idea quite fun, and Luke himself very entertaining to watch, but as someone who had played through the early sections of the game, I could appreciate what had changed and how much harder it was making things. It also made me reflect on how I left things with the game. Sure, I'd beat a few of the bosses and made it out of the starting areas, but looking back on it, there wasn't really anything I was super proud of. I wanted to be able to think back to my time with Dark Souls and feel a sense of achievement, and to accomplish that, I needed to do something which even Dark Souls veterans consider a challenge. Meet Ornstein and Smough, a pair of bosses with a reputation for possibly being the toughest fight in the base game. I've heard many Souls players say that if you can beat these two, then the rest of the game is easy in comparison. If I can tackle this legendary boss fight, then I would finally get that sense of achievement that I crave. And with that, I reinstalled the game and clicked play. Dark Souls gave me the signature welcome, and booted me back up at the moment of my last death. Seeing as I left the game after dying to Havel, I figured why not head back to him and see how much my skills had atrophied in my time away. Due to how Dark Souls' bonfire system works, I did at least get to familiarise myself with the basic controls on my way to him, and get a reminder of the tempo of combat. Despite not having played the game for a couple of months, I seem to be doing better than ever when it comes to fighting him. I'm dodging attacks, being patient, and I even start getting backstabs in. It's not all going my way though. I do occasionally get hit, which means I'm burning through my Estus flask, and the damage I'm dealing to him is pretty weak overall, meaning this will be a very long fight. After nearly 4 minutes straight of combat, I've got him to less than half health. And then this happens. My sword broke. I mean, it's still technically usable, but the damage just halved, meaning the second half would take me twice as long. I don't give up though. Perseverance is a key part of mastering a Souls game, so I stick with it. I've run out of healing, but I've got him down to less than 5% of his health. I only need to get a few more good hits on him, and then I'll have won. With my regular weapon broken, I have to find a different one to use until I can get it repaired. I ended up trying out a few different swords, but I either couldn't effectively wield them, or their movesets just weren't to my taste. In the end, I went with the winged spear, which was actually quite a bit of fun to use. The extra range is something I very much appreciate, because in a game like this, I like not having to get up close and personal with a lot of the gruesome creatures I face. The spear works well enough for now, allowing me to retrieve my souls and make it all the way back to Andre the Blacksmith, who was able to repair my busted equipment. But on top of fixing my gear, I also finally start upgrading it. This is something I neglected to do in the previous video, as I had no idea how good the random weapon I stumbled across was, or how important upgrading equipment was for progress, but now I've learnt my lesson and get to work on it. I'm able to upgrade the Balder Side Sword to +5, giving it a substantial boost in damage. I also take the time to start looking through these confusing charts on the wiki, in order to work out which upgrade paths I should eventually go down. It's not going to matter right now, but I just wanted to show that I'm actually doing my research this time around, rather than letting ignorance guide me. And with my sword both repaired and improved, it's time to head back to Havel and finally defeat him. I noticed that last time I fought him, I didn't really have much need of my shield, so switched to two-handing my weapon, which increases my damage output even further. And thanks to all these factors, this goes from a mini-boss fight which was taking me several minutes to complete, to one which I get finished in just over 60 seconds. With Havel dead, I get a ring which significantly boosts my carry weight, and also get to open up this door, leading out into Darkroot Basin. I'm way too scared to proceed any further, so instead decide to do some soul farming. This is the main farming method I found early on. It requires basically no skill, puts me in very little danger, and can be farmed infinitely from what I can tell. Gets me 555 souls every time, which may not be a crazy amount, but I had a few long-form YouTube videos to watch, and I could do both things at the same time. So by the time I was done catching up on content, I had over 426,000 souls, and could go from level 45 straight up to 67. I didn't just level up a crazy amount all at once though. I also visited the local merchant and made sure to buy all the key items he had, including the repair box, which now means I can repair my equipment at any bonfire, rather than having to run back to Andre every time. That's right, no more weapons breaking at inopportune times. Now every chance I get, I'm fixing them up and ensuring I can rely on them. I do still head back to Andre though and use some of my remaining souls to buy some items from him. And then I use some of my other added knowledge and kindle the bonfire above him. Normally bonfires only replenish up to 5 Estus flasks, but a kindled one gives you 10, which sounds twice as good to me. With that done, I decide to have another go at the nearby demon. This big brute has a mammoth health pool, which stopped me from defeating it last time. But now I've got an upgraded sword and plenty of healing items, meaning I'm able to wear it down within a couple of minutes. Fortunately for me, this is also one of those enemies who don't respawn, so now it's defeated, I have a clear path from the bonfire down into Darkroot Garden. From what I can tell, this area is an optional one, but I wanted to check it out anyway. And while we're on the subject, I want to quickly go over what I actually need to do in order to reach Ornstein and Smough. Step 1 is to ring the 2 bells of awakening. I've already dealt with the one that the gargoyles guard, but the other is in an arena called Quaileg's Domain. To get there, I'll need to go through both the Depths and Blight Town. Once I've done that and rung both bells, Sen's Fortress will open up. If I make it to the end of the fortress, I can then get to Anor Londo, and at the end of Anor Londo are the bosses Ornstein and Smough. So basically, there's a lot I need to do, but instead I'm just wandering through this garden. I think this Darkroot Garden section does give all of you watching a very good idea of how I play the game though, which is why I'll have kept footage of it up throughout the explaining section. I'm taking things very slow, very cautiously, and just generally acting as if I could be attacked at any moment. It's a strategy which will serve me incredibly well as I play, and I will only refine it further as I go. In this area we also have an optional boss, the Moonlight Butterfly. I've seen this fight play out before, so know the fundamentals of it, but I also get lucky in noticing a summon sign at the base of the stairs. With this I can summon Witch Beatrice to help me out. Normally I would only be able to damage the boss when it lands on the bridge, but Beatrice here can attack even while it's floating about, which will make the fight so much easier. In fact, between me using the door as cover and Beatrice just going ham on spells, this ends up being the easiest boss fight of the game. Which kinda sucks actually, as it's also got really calming music and a generally great atmosphere. Seriously, just soak this in for a minute. Honestly, still a bit sad that the boss fight is over, but there's plenty of the garden left for me to explore. While the butterfly gave great vibes, this moving tree gives me the most creepy vibes possible. To be clear, I don't think it ever attacks me in any way, but it put me so on edge that I felt I could no longer trust any trees in this area. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's trees fucking everywhere here, so I was insanely paranoid throughout the rest of this section. I push a little deeper, killing the enemies I encounter and grabbing every item I can find. But as my Estus start to run low, I decide it's time to head back to Andre and the safety of familiarity. I end up doing a bit more soul farming so that I have enough to buy a bunch of Titanite shards, allowing me to upgrade my Grasscrest shield to +5 and all my armour to +3. Should mean I'm a fair bit tankier from here on out. I also went down a rabbit hole on what the whole Covenant thing is in Dark Souls, and as it both scares and confuses me, I head back to the Gargoyle Tower to meet up with this guy, who lets me abandon whatever Covenant I'd ended up with. I still don't fully get what it's all about, I just figure it's best not to be a part of any of them. I also buy all of his Purging Stones, as the curse status is another thing which petrifies me, so I want to be prepared. My final bit of bartering comes in the form of heading to the undead merchant near the depths and buying a bunch of status curing items from her too, before finally getting a handful of arrows, just to use up the last of the souls I have. All that busy work sorted, I decide it's time to check out the door that Havel was guarding. I've already dealt with Darkroot Garden and survived, how much worse could Darkroot Basin really be? Well, the garden had trees and a butterfly, while the basin has these crystal creatures and a hydra. Still, I figure I can't stop now, so I try and lure the crystal beings round towards the tower, not only isolating them from one another, but also preventing the hydra from blasting me with its long-range attack. Progress is slow, but it works out well, and to make matters a tad easier, the hydra actually kills the final crystal thing for me. Maybe it's actually on my side. No, guess not. It deals quite a bit of damage as I try to reach it, but eventually I make it into the water, where it goes for the close-range attack of Mass Headbutt. Not exactly the smartest attack pattern, as it puts it to within sword range, allowing me to chop off a head. But once I do this, I then have to work out where to stand to be able to hit it again. I can see an edge in the water, so I'll no doubt die if I go too far forward, so instead I have to constantly reposition myself, trying to get the hydra to attack in just the right way. With every head I chop off, the creature gets weaker, but also harder to attack. By the time I'm on the final head, I reach a kind of roadblock, as I just can't hit it with my sword. After a good few minutes of trying and failing to reach it from the ground, I decide to climb up the rock to the side, as the added height should allow me to reach my target. That kinda pissed me off. I got so close to killing that boss. I had rendered it virtually harmless, and then my dude just trips and falls to his death. Not cool. I decide to give it another shot, and this time I get through things a fair bit quicker. But once again, when I'm down to the final head, I find I just can't hit it. Keep in mind that your character moves forward when they attack, so it's not like I can risk standing close to the edge to try and reach it, or else I'll just die in the same way again. Instead of trying to keep fighting fair, I instead find a spot where the beast can't get me, and then pull out a crossbow. It does very little damage, and I don't have many bolts, but it seems to be hurting the creature. And once I run out of bolts, I very calmly go into my inventory and see what other ranged options I have. And I can't help but laugh watching this back. I'm trying to work out if I can use pyromancy at this point, and all the while the hydra is failing to get anywhere close to hitting me. I haven't figured out magic yet, so instead equip the law. Good job I bought those arrows earlier, as they allow me to achieve this result. That's 2 mini-bosses and an optional boss defeated. Hell yeah! I'm starting to feel confident. Fuck it, let's go to the catacombs! You need a divine weapon to deal with this area apparently, but I can use a Stora's straight sword effectively now, and I figured out how pyromancy works, so what could I possibly have to fear? Besides the surprise skeletons, exploding heads, perpetual darkness, and absolute lack of music. You know what, maybe I'll save this place for later. Back to Firelink Shrine, where I decide to pick up a few tricky items I missed out on before. I'd seen a video where someone rolls onto the tower and can then drop onto the roof, so decide to give it a go. See that? First try. Providing you ignore the fact that I've clearly had to use 4 Estus on this route, and must have had to heal up every time I missed the roll and took full damage. Still, I've got the key for the Undead Asylum, which is not what I actually expected to find up there, but it means I can go back to the starting location of the game at some point. What I thought was on the roof was a ring that lets you move normally in water, but turns out that's actually at the asylum itself, so I had my wires a little crossed there. One item I did learn the correct location for though was large Titanite shards. These have a chance of dropping from the slimes you find in the depths, and the main concentration of them is right outside a bonfire room, meaning they're pretty easy to farm. I don't know exactly how many shards I'll need, so once again just do the mindless farming method while watching some long form content on the other screen. By the time I'm done, there's a whole bunch more leveling I can do, and then it's back to Andre to modify my gear to +6, before then reinforcing it to +10. I'm also able to push my armour up to +6, and while I could upgrade it further, it would require Titanite chunks, and I'd rather save them for future weapon upgrades. But of course to manage that, I'll need to get the correct ember. The Dark Souls equipment upgrading mechanics are fairly complicated, and can definitely be confusing for first timers like myself, but it also does feel super rewarding when you are able to upgrade your gear that bit further. Back to the depths now to try and complete this area, and obviously my first step is kindling the bonfire, as I need all the healing I can get my hands on. I start making my way deeper into the sewers, and behind this fence is a giant rat. What you're supposed to do is reach the rat's arena and fight it as a more standard mini-boss fight, but I have a bow, and I bought a whole bunch of arrows, so I just shoot the thing from the gaps in the fence. The Hydra taught me just how useful a bow can be in a tricky situation, so I'd be a fool not to use that knowledge from here on out. The bow may be great, but it's really just a situational weapon, and I'm still relying on the old sword and shield combo to get me through most encounters. Travelling through the depths, I have to take things very, very carefully. In the last video I saw firsthand that there are dangerous basilisks hiding in the lower levels. These enemies can curse you, halving your health even after you die, so I really don't want to face them. Sure, I bought those purging stones earlier just in case that happens, but I'd rather not have to deal with it at all. Instead, I try and find a route through this place, which keeps me fighting the more regular enemies, like zombies and rats. Using my trademark ultra-cautious style, I'm able to slowly find my way through the initial areas, and thanks to watching an old Outside Extra livestream, I'm able to figure out exactly how to deal with this waterfall. If I'd fallen down that, I'd be dealing with basilisks. Instead, I've just opened up a shortcut back to the bonfire. I feel like the depths really is the first area in the game where you 100% should look up some info on where to go, because the game really tries to fuck you here in a way which seems mean even by Dark Souls standards. Despite me checking my progress with Ellens on stream, I still do end up getting lost a few times, but fortunately I don't fall down any holes, and I'm able to kill all the enemies up above. But now I'm nearly at the boss arena, and just outside it I come across this. It's a summon sign for Solaire. He was a huge help when I had to face the Bell Gargoyles, so I'm definitely going to want him to lend a hand against what we're fighting next. This big beastie looks truly terrifying, but at least we outnumber it. I decide to keep my distance at first and try to figure out what moves it uses, but while I'm doing this, it absolutely annihilates Solaire. I'm now left to end this fight alone, and with a boss who's almost entirely unharmed. So that's exactly what I do. I have just enough stamina to take a standard hit on my shield, and the Gaping Dragon seems to be quite a slow boss overall, meaning I can use openings to get around behind it and slash at the hind legs. It's a pretty simple strategy, and certainly doesn't seem to be the fastest way to kill a boss, but it's giving me steady progress. I do get kind of greedy at the end and take a little damage, but all in all, it doesn't matter. The boss is defeated, and I barely took any damage. Wasn't quite a no-hit run on the dragon, but it was pretty damn close. The reward for that fight is the key to Blighttown, which lets me open this big door. I could head down to this notorious area immediately, but I'd rather not be humbled so soon after my victory, so instead decide to do something a little different. I promise there's a good reason for this. That's right, I'm back at the Undead Asylum. This is the starting area of the game, although it has changed a little since I was first here, most notably with how there's suddenly some stronger enemies hanging about. What else is here is Snuggly.
You, give me warm, give me soft.
Snuggly is a merchant of sorts, who trades items in a really weird way. You basically have to drop specific items in her nest, quit out of a game, and then when you load back in, she'll have left something different for you. I don't actually get anything too important from doing this, mostly just extra upgrade materials. I just wanted to show off when I'm actually making sure to read up on the game and learn what kind of cool stuff there is to find. With this pleasant detour completed, it's time to go exploring. And what I find is that this area now has some scary knights in it. I've certainly become a lot stronger since the first time I met one of these, but they're still reasonably challenging foes to face. But by making my way past the first of these, I get to encounter an old friend. Look, it's the knight from the start of the game, who gave me my Estus flasks. He must have got better somehow. Oh no, wait, he's a baddie now, and wants to kill me. This proved to be quite the sad fight for me. I still don't feel good about having to kill this guy who helped me on the start of my journey, but it's what must be done, so I do it and keep exploring. Among my rewards, I find the Rusted Iron Ring, which is the item which lets you move normally in water and on other types of difficult terrain. It's going to be incredibly helpful once we reach Blighttown, which is why I wanted to come here first. Yeah, that's right, I actually had a plan. Not to brag too much or anything, but I kind of know what I'm doing these days. I decide I want to check out my old cell, where I first loaded into the game, but there's another of these big knights guarding it. Still, the big guy proves to be a good test for parrying, which is a skill I feel I'm underusing a bit. And when I reach my cell, there's an item left there. Just a peculiar doll of some kind, with no apparent purpose, but I guess it's a nice keepsake of my time here. Only one thing left to do, which is kill the big demon who resides here. To do this, I have to walk out into the arena where my first boss fight was located, and fall through the floor, losing half my health in the process. Obviously, my first priority is getting my health top back up, but the stray demon isn't making things easy. At first chipping away at my health while my shield is up, and then reducing it drastically every time I do manage to heal. I try and keep my distance, but things don't go well. Now, did any of you spot the critical mistake I made there? No, it's not the dying. This is Dark Souls after all. You're supposed to die to the bosses. No, it was that I had 6 humanity on me and didn't kindle the bonfire directly outside the boss arena. I wouldn't have had to use any items, and I could have been entering this fight with 10 Estus rather than 5 each time. But no, I completely neglected to do that because I'm an idiot. And keep in mind that every time I go back to this fight, I lose half my health from the drop, meaning I'm basically having to fight this demon with only 4 Estus to my name. I'm not sure if it's at all possible to land a drop attack on this guy, like you would with the regular Asylum demon, but my attempts mostly went like this. Considering I'm dying to this boss again, and again, and again, you might think I'm having a bad time, but honestly, this felt like the first proper Dark Souls boss experience for me. With the majority of bosses, I beat them first or second try without too much hassle, and the one fight which really held me up before was against the Bell Gargoyles, which I truly did find frustrating. But that was because I felt like I wasn't really learning anything when facing the Gargoyles. Against the Stray Demon, every death felt like I was making progress. I got a better understanding of his moves, could slowly figure out how to dodge the swings, and calculate the distance away from the red blast that I needed to be. It might not look like it in the footage, but I was really learning how to tackle this fight, and after 8 deaths in a row, I felt ready to actually win this time. I kept to the back of the demon, avoided using lock-on so I was more free in my movement, and perfectly distanced myself so that the blast couldn't hit me. Halfway through the fight I realised I wasn't really using my shield anymore, so I switched to two-handing in order to boost my damage. I use up the last of my Estus soon after, but with the added damage output, I actually stand a chance of killing it this time. Now that felt good. The Stray Demon was a worthy opponent. So worthy, in fact, I even take a moment to bow to him. But with that boss fight done, the only route really left for me is to tackle Blighttown. I wasn't quite feeling up to the challenge yet though, which is a feeling I've made sure to listen to while playing. I now know when I can push ahead to new areas, when I should stick to somewhere familiar, or when I should call it a day and take a break. And while it's not something I can really show in any way, I think this change has been my best improvement overall. Previously I had plenty of times where I would try out a Souls game when I was feeling frustrated or angry, but now I get that I should only be playing these games when I'm calm and composed. So rather than head to a tricky new area, I instead decide to mop up a couple of enemies I skipped over in the past, namely some Black Knights. And right after expertly defeating this one, I noticed the big red bridge drake here. I wouldn't have thought much of it before, but I have a bow now, and I've just gotta know if this thing can be damaged or not. You just saw it vanish too, right? As far as I'm aware, that's my first time breaking Dark Souls, but when I head to the bottom of the tower, I seem to hear it again, but it's still not reappeared. I fire a few arrows to see if it maybe just is invisible, but it seems to have completely gone. Curiosity's got the better of me at this point, and I have to figure out what's going on. I make my way back to the Undead Burg and to my old familiar farming spot. I reach the bridge, and the drake is just there as if nothing's happened. Kinda anticlimactic to be honest, so I decide to shoot the jackass. Might have pissed myself just a little bit there, wasn't expecting it to try and pounce me, but now I know I can deal damage to it. With a bit more testing, I figure out that I can shoot it in the tail from under the bridge, and it can't do anything to reach me. It'll be a lengthy undertaking, but in theory, I could kill the creature. At least, that's what I was thinking when this happens. I've got a brand new sword! Plus, it's got this fancy two-handed power attack airwave blast, which is pretty fucking cool. It's quite a slow attack, so maybe isn't the most practical thing to use, but I'm glad to have found this. After a bit of comparison and a bunch of googling, it seemed like this sword wasn't going to replace the trusty Baldur Swag sword, but as a thanks for getting it, I decided to let the Bridge Drake live. That wasn't the only thing I looked up though. I also decided to take a sneak peek at what the Catacombs has to offer. I was a bit too scared to traverse through them before, but after seeing the reward I'd get at the end, I just had to take a chance. So here I am, back in this dark and gloomy dungeon. I was going to say it was dark and dangerous, but looking back, this place wasn't half as dangerous as I thought it was going to be. I have a divine weapon which stops the skeletons from reforming, and by taking my time, I was able to avoid any nasty drops from up high, or taking too much damage from any traps. Like many areas in the game, there's a bit of a puzzle element when it comes to exploring, but the main challenge of the place is psychological. The lack of light sources in some spaces, and the complete absence of music throughout, still puts me on edge, even as I'm watching back. But the enemies you face early on don't seem to actually be that tricky to deal with. By taking my time and not letting fear get the better of me, I was able to make steady progress, eventually leading to this tomb. And at this point, I get to brag. I have really good eyesight. Like, good enough that I've had friends joke about it being my superpower, and that means that I saw this big Titanite demon from a mile away. I'm gonna freeze frame it for a second here, because I genuinely feel great that I saw the tiniest bit of light on the curved horns and the glimmer of its staff, and instantly could make out the rough shape of a Titanite demon. It's clearly meant to be a jump scare to frighten players, as it doesn't aggro until you're really close, but you didn't get me this time, Dark Souls. I'm finally one step ahead of you, and now I get to have a fair fight with this creature. The jump scare element aside, this is actually quite a tricky fight. The last one of these I faced was in a vast arena, but this time we're crammed into a hallway with very little room to navigate. On top of that, I'm still using the Astora sword rather than Baldur's, meaning my damage output is lower than usual. Despite both these factors, I'm doing a decent job, and as long as nothing wacky happens, I should be able to win. What the fuck was that? I just got pincered through a wall. And then, once I get back up and start healing, I'm knocked down to a sliver of health again. With all my Estus used up and the standard attacks from the demon chipping away at my health even when I block them, this has suddenly become a much closer fight. I can't risk running away and getting stabbed in the back, so instead try and remain calm and wear him down. Only one of us can survive this battle. Time to see who it will be. Holy crap, that was close. I was so shook up after that encounter that I had to step away from the computer for a second, as I was literally shaking. When I did come back, I was still a little nervous, and certainly in no state to carry on. Rather than push through with no healing, little health and frayed nerves, I made the smart call, and retreated to a bonfire I discovered earlier. I can kindle it, refresh my character, and call it a day there. Like I said earlier, I need to be calm and collected when playing this game, so I make sure I'm taking breaks as often as I need them. When I do return, there's a lot of old ground to cover, but once I make it back to the Demon's Tomb, I'm able to advance further and find more enemies to fight. And when I kill this flaming necromancer guy, I get one hell of a reward. This is the Skull Lantern, one of very few items in the game which casts light. I had googled earlier to see what I could get to give me greater visibility down here, and there were only a few options, and all the other options require you to either be a mage, or be much further along in the story. I got a real lucky drop here, but at this point, I don't feel like I really need it. I've kind of adapted to the darkness of the area, and don't want to sacrifice my shield just for a little more light. Instead, I push ahead through the darkness, and what greets me is one of these. That's a bone wheel, and I was so scared of these things. They're another Dark Souls enemy which has a real reputation to them, but in the end, they didn't prove to be all that challenging to take down. Sure, I had to be sensible when fighting them, but I really felt like their reputation was worse than they actually were. Which is probably going to be the case with Ornstein and Smough, right? With the bone wheels all dead, I've made my way to my next goal. I know there's a boss ahead of me, I just hope I'm ready for them. This is Pinwheel, and despite being fairly difficult to reach, he seems to be generally regarded as the easiest boss in the game. I knew his reputation going into this fight, which may have led to me underestimating him a little bit. I know there'll be some of you out there now thinking, oh no Sarge, you didn't die to Pinwheel did you? Not Pinwheel? And rather than answer that question verbally, I think I'll just show you what happened. Of course I didn't die. It's Pinwheel after all. But despite being one of the weakest bosses in the game, he drops one of the best rewards by far, the Rite of Kindling. With this, I can now kindle bonfires twice, meaning I'll have access to 15 Estus flasks at a time. Genuinely an amazing reward, and one that I'll be making good use of. Upon leaving Pinwheel's boss arena, there's this whole area which is pitch black, but where you can see some glowing stones and an item in the distance. With the Skull Lantern I can actually kind of see where I'm going, but the emphasis is on the kinda. Sure, I could venture even deeper into the darkness, and if I was a braver man, maybe I would. But I'm not. I'm a coward. So instead I hide myself away and resort to checking the wiki and finding out where it's safe to go next. That pitch black place appears to be the Tomb of the Giants, which I am most definitely scared of. But the other direction apparently has a shortcut, so I'm able to take it and find my way back to where I fought the Bone Wheels. Getting back to Firelink Shrine is easy enough from here, and once there I notice that Gold Boy has shown up, so figure I should have a chat with him.
Oh, hello. I'm considering a change of location. I have a rather pressing matter to attend to up above. That keeper has served me well, but enough with her.
Well, that was pretty fucking sinister. After that concerning conversation, I head back to the depths, kindle the bonfire there so I can get myself 15 Estus at a time, and then decide I should head down to Blighttown. This is an area with an incredibly bad reputation, meaning both my caution and fear levels are maxed out. Fortunately, the enemies here decide they want to reassure me that things won't be quite so bad, and do this by throwing themselves over the edge so I don't have to fight them. Very considerate, much appreciated. There ends up being quite a few more enemies up ahead though, so I will actually have to do some proper fighting in this place. Some of it goes well, such as killing all these guys one after another, but some also goes poorly, like this thing which tries to bite my head off. Arguably the toughest challenge of this location is figuring out where to go. I know that my final destination is ground level, but have no idea how to get there. Fall damage can be pretty severe, so I can't just try and drop down again and again, but finding the desired path doesn't seem to be working for me either. Eventually I decide to risk this short drop down to a couple of enemies, and it gets me to this bridge section which has a nearby bonfire. Despite the fact that I still had all my Estus remaining, I was so convinced that I was struggling with this area that I decide not to move away from this bridge after kindling the bonfire. I try and use my bow to deal with enemies who are in range, but eventually have to call it a day, as my nerves have clearly got the better of me. I return a couple of days later with my confidence restored, ready to take on the challenge ahead of me. And for the most part, it does go well. I'm able to handle the tricky platforming sections without falling to my death, my sword and shield style of fighting remains effective in this region, and best of all, I'm starting to really get the hang of using my bow to make things easier. There are several enemies who I shoot from a distance and who then decide to throw themselves to their deaths. Plenty of others I can weaken with arrows so I have an easier time when I get close to them, and I get to destroy this horrible thing without ever going near it. Eventually I make it down to ground level, where there's not only different enemies to fight, but also a poison swamp, which means I spend almost all of my time suffering from the poison status effect. Fortunately, the actual damage from poison is relatively low, and with my large stockpile of Estus, I can comfortably outheal the damage. All in all, I feel like I'm dealing well with this section, and then I get told this. Bit concerning to see a woman in a bikini and a bucket attack me with a giant meat cleaver, but turns out she isn't actually all that strong, so I'm able to take her out with ease. Down in the swamps I do end up getting a little lost again, because I clearly have zero sense of direction, so I decide to check the wiki to find out where to go. No sense in stumbling blindly through the poison after all. Turns out it's this particularly horrifying looking location covered in spider webs and eggs. Sure ain't pretty, but at least these creatures here don't seem hostile. And when I reach the fog door, I get the option to summon Man-Eater Mildred. Seems like she's decided to help me out now that I've bested her in combat. Time to take on Lava Spider Lady. She vomits out pools of lava, which does make reaching her kinda tricky, and when I do eventually get to her, she unleashes an AoE which deals pretty strong damage. I start thinking about what tactics I should utilise to deal with this boss, when she suddenly chooses to wedge herself and Mildred into the entrance. She's legit got herself stuck, meaning Mildred and I are able to unleash a flurry of attacks and easily finish her off. The first half was a tad concerning, but boy did she make it easy in the end. And with Quelaag defeated, I can now ring the second bell. After admiring the pretty architecture, of course. With the second bell rung, Sen's Fortress is now open. Once I pass through there, I can reach Anor Londo and achieve my final goal. In order to not have to do too much tricky climbing through Blighttown, I use my first homeward bone, letting me teleport back to my previous bonfire. I've got 20 of them, so I should probably be more willing to use them in the future. Because I've got a whole bunch of souls, I do elect to rest and level up, which respawns all the enemies, meaning I am going to have to fight my way back to safety. I've got to say, I really love the risk-reward elements that bonfires provide. Resting up means I get all my health back and can spend my souls, but by respawning enemies it also makes it so that it's an actual choice, rather than something which I should just automatically do. On my way back I get afflicted by the toxic status, which is basically poison on steroids. But I bought a bunch of different moss clumps earlier on, so I can just cure it and move on. I get lost a surprisingly small number of times and return to the safety of the depths, which is not a phrase I ever thought I'd be uttering. While here, I decide there's something sensible that I can do. Rats drop an item called humanity, and I need humanity in order to kindle bonfires. Seeing as I'm now wanting to kindle all bonfires twice, I decide to start my own little rat farm. There's a group of them not far from my slime farm, which is real convenient for me, as I can now stockpile another useful item. On my way to Sen's fortress, I pass through Firelink Shrine and spot that the bonfire has gone out. I head down the stairs to check on the firekeeper and find this. Gold Guy is nowhere to be found, so I'm pretty sure I know who committed this crime. As I start wandering around looking for clues, I spot this thing. I head towards it and get the option to chat.
Ah, hello. Was it you who rang the Bell of Awakening? I am the Primordial Serpent, King Seeker Frapt, close friend of the great Lord Gwyn, chosen undead, who has rung the Bell of Awakening. I wish to elucidate your fate. Do you seek such enlightenment?
Time for me to head to the wiki once more to find out if I'm going to regret this decision. Seems like yes is the better option, so I go along with what this serpent's selling.
Very well. Then I am pleased to share. Chosen undead, your fate is to succeed the great Lord Gwyn, so that you may link the fire, cast away the dark, and undo the curse of the undead. To this end, you must visit Anor Londo and acquire the Lord Vessel.
Cool, Anor Londo was where I wanted to head anyway, so looks like our goals align. Reaching that location does mean I pass by Andre the Blacksmith once more, and while here I decide to reinforce my bow. I didn't do this earlier as I was hoping to get a better bow first, but it turns out there's really not many bows in the game, and the basic longbow seems to be one of the better ones. With it now at plus 10, it should serve me well in the fortress. Speaking of which, it's finally time for me to actually set foot inside here. I'm beset by a pair of snake boys straight away, and one is kind enough to set off a weighted floor plate, warning me that this location is going to be filled with traps. Joke's on Sen though, because I'm super into traps. Inside the great chamber of the fortress are all these pendulum axes, just waiting to knock me off and send me to my doom. There's also some more snakes, this time with 4 arms and magic at their disposal. By using my bow, I'm able to eliminate these enemies out of their effective range, which is going to help me a great deal. Dodging these blades is tricky enough, without being attacked at the same time. I get to draw one of the snake boys into the pendulums thanks to a well-placed arrow, and it turns out the fall isn't lethal. There is a Titanite demon down there though, along with other enemies in the distance, so probably will be better for me if I don't have to head down there. After killing the snake who found his way back to me, I offer up his body as sacrifice to the demons, in hope they'll grant me safe passage in the future. For the most part, I do a pretty decent job of avoiding the traps set in this place. I do get a shot once, and clipped by this boulder, but that was about the worst of it for me. If anything, the traps here were helping me defeat the enemies more than they were hurting me. There's a lot of chests here, meaning I get myself plenty of loot, but also my first encounter with a mimic. Do you know how many chests I've stabbed so far, just for nothing to occur? All of them. Every single one I have attacked for absolutely no reason. I am genuinely so glad to finally encounter a mimic, as now all that chest stabbing actually served a purpose. Some more exploring leads me to this captured prisoner.
You seem quite lucid. A rare thing in these times. I am Logan. I'm a bit cooped up, as you can see. I have a bright idea. Suppose you set me free. I'm old and empty-handed, but I could repay you with knowledge and sorcery. This place is melting my mind. The inactivity is repressive.
Big Hat Logan here got himself trapped, but my starter pick of the Master Key is finally paying off, meaning I can free him right away.
Oh, heavens. Thank you. I'm saved. and I'd love to resume my travels. But I must log a few things first, and I owe you a favor. I will return to Firelink Shrine. Speak with me there, so that I may impart my sorcery. Oh, hello. Don't mind me. Go on ahead. I'll be along later. Whoa, I'll be just fine, young one.
Normally I'd feel good that I got another NPC to the safety of Firelink Shrine, but now that we've had a murder there, I'm not so sure I did the right thing. Seems I've dealt with the interior of Sen's fortress well enough, as this fog door leads me outside, and shows me the giant who's keeping this constant supply of boulders flowing. The great thing about giants is that they're really easy to hit with a bow. It may take a fair few arrows, but I whittle them down, meaning I shouldn't have to deal with dodging those boulders anymore. Cool! Seems instead I'm going to be dodging giant firebombs. I know there's a bonfire nearby and have a rough idea of the location, but I have no idea how powerful those bombs are. I haven't rested since Andre's and don't much fancy having to do the whole fortress again, so I'm going to need to get this right first time. I bait out the first firebomb, time my next run for right after the second, and then spot the area I think I'm supposed to drop down to. I check that I'm not going to fall to my death, and then drop to safety. I have officially made it past the interior of Sen's fortress, but now I've got giants to deal with. And it seems like the giants respawn, as after resting at the bonfire, big old boulder giant is back. Out here at least he doesn't seem to pose a threat to me, so I don't waste my arrows killing him again. Instead I try to find my way to the firebomb giant, who is somewhere up above. I start making my way towards him, but then get shot. Seems like he's got an archer buddy, which makes this whole area significantly more challenging. The archer doesn't actually deal much damage, but the attacks stagger me, making it harder to dodge the incoming fireballs. Eventually I'm able to time a jump to make it across this broken path and inside this tower, where I meet a friendly merchant. This guy sells a couple of rings that I would really like to own, but as I leveled up at the last bonfire, I don't have the souls to buy either of them yet, so we'll have to come back for them later, and just settle for some arrows now instead. I try to use said arrows to deal with the archer from a distance, but it seems I deal 0 damage at this range, and when I get closer, he's able to hit me before I can properly aim my shot. I'd like to say I realise right away that this isn't going to work, but there's a good few minutes of me just standing on this bridge trying to find the perfect spot. I finally accept that it's not going to work out, so decide to jump back over the bridge. Bet you thought I was gonna die there. I know I sure did. Good to know it's nothing a flask can't fix. From this point I explore just about everywhere I can, finding plenty of items, but nothing that's going to be relevant in this video. Looks like the way I need to actually go is the narrow walkway where I get shot and bombed, so I take a run at it, quite literally, as it seems the only way to get past is to sprint at full pelt. In this next area I finally get to kill the crossbow zombie who annoyed me earlier, and I also see the fog door to the boss. But first, I'm killing that bloody firebomb giant. Or at least, trying to, as he's the one who draws first blood. I'm able to quickly put some attacks into him though, and it doesn't take long to get a handle on his attack pattern. I cut through his thick ankles, killing him swiftly, and then to piss him off in the afterlife, I roll through all of his firebombs. Up ahead is the boss, and I have to see if I can just shoot him from up here. But no, seems the arrows just pass right through him, so I guess I'll have to fight him properly. Before heading through the fog door, I make sure to explore the final tower I've not reached yet, which proves wise, as there's a summon sign for someone named Iron Tarkus. Looks like quite the tanky fella, so should prove handy in this battle. I pass through the fog door and decide to close the distance quickly. The Iron Golem unleashes this seriously badass air swipe attack, confirming that I'll need to challenge him in close quarters to win. I try to roll out of the way of his first swipe, but it connects before the action is completed, and as my character stands up, they decide now is the time to roll away, leading to their death. Well, that went poorly. On the bright side of things, it seems the firebomb giant has stayed dead, so I don't need to fight him again, but now I'm going to have to do the boss fight without a summon. I push in, retrieve my souls, and start the battle proper. It's a little rough at first as the Iron Golem deals serious damage, and I'm still learning how his attacks work, but after a few hits I get the hang of things. And when he stumbles, I'm able to take full advantage, dropping his health to under half. Soon after, he gets revenge, grabbing me in his hand and throwing me down. I'm just lucky he didn't throw me off the edge, as that's my biggest fear in this fight. There's a couple of close calls where I end up almost dropping over the side, but I'm able to get him down on one knee once more and then finish the fight for good. and with the golem defeated, this ring of light appears. I've made it to Anor Londo, which has got to be the most pleasant looking area of the game so far. There's this magnificent architecture, a warm orange light bathing the scene, and almost a sense of calm to the place. But like every location in this game, there are still enemies I need to fight, starting with these sentinels. While big and intimidating, they're also quite slow and cumbersome for the most part, which makes for an easy fight if you can show patience. They also don't seem to get aggressive unless you move real close to them, which means I'm able to shoot this guy to death with arrows. Arrows are pretty cheap and these guys give a good number of souls, so it's a safe if slow way to increase my soul count. But I figure I can still fight with my sword, as that's much more cost effective. After dealing with these enemies, we get to meet our second Firekeeper.
What is it? What am I? Well, I am the keeper of the bonfire. If not for me, what beacon would there be in this lost city? A gatekeeper and a guide. That is my calling.
She seems much better equipped to deal with a potential murderer, so let's hope the gold guy doesn't kill her too. I rest up at her bonfire before heading forward and seeing what challenge awaits me next. It's a gargoyle. It's a bloody gargoyle. That's the one boss fight I just could not manage, and I don't want a repeat of it. Deciding I don't want to deal with that right now, I instead farm these sentinels for souls. For a real long time, in fact, as I end up with enough souls to go back and purchase the rings I mentioned earlier, get 999 standard arrows, and also level up several times. I'm about as well prepped as I could possibly be, so I guess there's nothing to do but actually fight the gargoyle. I make my way down to the winged beast and await my fate. But when combat begins, things go reasonably well. I'm able to block most attacks with my shield, deal decent damage, and there's no sign of a second gargoyle appearing. I even end up chopping his tail off, giving me a fancy axe which, let's face it, I'm never going to use. That was so much better than the Bell Gargoyle boss fight, and I now feel like I can do anything. If gargoyles are no longer a problem, then Ornstein and Smough don't stand a chance. But before I can reach them, I need to find out where to go, because this bridge is a dead end. I've mentioned getting lost a few times in this video, but this one isn't on me. I searched around for ages and saw no obvious path. In the end, I resorted to checking the wiki page looking for where I was supposed to go. Turns out what you have to do to progress is drop down onto this weird strut thing, climb it up, and then drop down to the balcony. Not only is it wild to assume players would figure this out, but it's such a narrow route that I almost fall off on the drop. But I'm making progress now, and I'm rewarded with these very easy enemies in white robes. There are more narrow paths for me to follow, but by some miracle I don't fall to my death even once. This platforming section now over, I find a lever to push, which lowers the bridge that was a dead end before. Great news. Besides the fact there's now a second gargoyle attacking me. It seems to get a little stuck on the terrain and be uncertain if it even wants to attack me, so I use my arrows to try and draw it forward. But after every time it attacks, it decides to back up again, so I figure I'll try and finish it off bowman style. Before advancing further into Anor Londo, I descend the stairs and find myself at the very bottom of a chamber of white-robed idiots. This crew is super simple to take down, even when they vastly outnumber me. There's a fair few different items down here, but the real reward is this big painting. After so much time spent fighting for my life, it's nice to take a breather and just admire a piece of art. Can't do this all day though, it's time to push ahead. Seems like there's a new enemy type every few feet in Anor Londo, as I'm now fighting those winged brain demons who flew me here. And by fighting, I of course mean attempting to kill them from safety with my bow. It's an incredibly slow method, but it's also very safe, as all the enemies in this region don't seem to chase very far. Seems I'm not the only one who favours the bow, as while fighting a couple more of the brain beasts in a more honourable fashion, I take a massive arrow to the side. These flying creatures aren't all that tough to handle alone, but when you're also getting shot at, the challenge increases exponentially. Up ahead are a pair of Anor Londo archers, whose arrows not only deal a nasty chunk of damage, but also send me flying. Conversely, at this distance my arrows seem to do no damage to them whatsoever. I try and rush towards them, making it up the roof strut safely, but soon realise the archer will just knock me off the edge if I get any closer. So instead, I use a tactic I saw when I checked the wiki earlier: poison arrows. I've not really used these before, but I've got a small stockpile stored away, and apparently they're a good way of dealing with this pair. But with such a small number, I don't want to be wasting my shots. I use some standard arrows at first, in order to get my eye in on where I need to stand and aim. Once I've got an idea of that, I switch to the poison arrows, which I immediately shoot into the wall. Okay, so I wasted a few of them, but I do get a pair to hit the first archer, which now means he's taking 3 points of damage a second. These guys have 464 health it seems, so I do have to wait for 155 seconds, or nearly 3 minutes, for the first one to die. And then I get to repeat the process all over again with archer number 2. Look, it may take a while, but I refuse to die to this pair, so I'm just happy this worked. And with them both dead, I can now safely walk this incredibly narrow ledge. I have to be super cautious while crossing it, which makes me twice as glad to not be dealing with the archers at the same time. Once off the ledge and inside, I get a wave of relief, as I find a room containing both a bonfire and Solaire.
You really are fond of chatting with me, aren't you? If I didn't know better, I'd think you had feelings for me. Oh no, dear me, pretend you didn't hear that.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna fuck Solaire. First things first though, rest up and kindle the bonfire. Inside this building there's more of the Silver Knights, but these ones don't have bows, making for a much more straightforward battle. Most of what I do in this building is just fight through these knights, but I do also find this hidden room which is shrouded in darkness and filled with chests. I refuse to believe these chests aren't guarded by a giant demon of some kind, so enter the room with maximum paranoia. When I attack one of the chests and it turns out to be a mimic, I'm actually filled with a sense of relief. Mimics are somehow far more comforting than the fear of the unknown. In the rest of the chests I find Havel's gear, and you know what that means. It's cosplay time. Hey look everyone, I'm Havel. I sure hope some sexy adventurer doesn't kill me at the bottom of my tower. All this stuff is way too heavy for my build, but sometimes it's fun just to do a little cosplay. Soon after that I end up finding the old Onion Knight.
Ah, you again. Let me guess. Were you repelled by the Silver Knights? Oh, don't be ashamed. 'Tis the fate of vanguards like you and I. I'll think of something. We can overcome this together.
Seems he's struggling with some Silver Knights up ahead, but they're nothing I can't handle. At this stage in the game, these guys are hardly a challenge, so are swiftly dispatched.
Oh ho! What's on your mind, friend? Wait. You defeated those monsters? Fantastic! I'm saved! This Knight of Katarina hereby commends you. Take this as a token of my gratitude. But be warned, gallantry entails great risks. Next time, give me a chance to come up with a plan.
I'm soon able to find a shortcut which takes me back to Solaire's bonfire, meaning it's time for my final level up before the boss we've all been waiting for. I'm pretty confident with my stats overall, as I've done quite a bit of level grinding, so nothing here should be holding me back. There's a few enemies I have to face on my way to the boss chamber, one of which being this Titanite demon. It's in this tiny little room, and remembering how the cramp fight against the one in the catacombs went, I figure there's a better way to deal with it. As a Skyrim veteran, I know just how effective an arrow to the knee can be. The ranged approach also works fairly well in the room right before the bosses. There's this archer across the way who I'm able to stagger with my own arrows, preventing him from ever getting an attack in. And then I do the same sort of thing with this golden sentinel. It's starting to look like the approach to the bosses will be a reasonably safe one, but then the final enemy gets all aggressive and starts rushing me. I try to use my bow for a bit, but I get punished for doing so. I'm not sure if my black eye orb quivering is some sort of euphemism, but if it is then it seems like my character is a real masochist. Probably not a bad thing to be, considering how dangerous this world is. Eventually I slay the golden sentinel and decide to take a look around before going through the fog door. My curious nature is rewarded when I come across this guy.
Who are you? Forge your weapons?
Unfortunately, there's no extra upgrading I can do with the big guy, but his doorway does lead out to the area with the winged brain demons, opening up another nice little shortcut for me. I head back to the chamber leading to the bosses, heal up for the final time, and then come across a summon sign for Solaire. He asked me earlier to summon him whenever I have a chance to, so obviously I'm going to oblige. Fingers crossed he'll perform better than he did against the Gaping Dragon. Not a great start. We haven't even made it into the boss room yet and he's already received some damage. Still, better to have him than to not. And right before I traverse the white light, I remember that I bought a lightning defense ring earlier. I'm pretty sure these two deal lightning damage, so it'll probably help me out. It's time for the fight we've all been waiting for. And with this first attempt, I'm just gonna let it play out for all of you. Yeah, so that was the one and only time I fought Ornstein and Smough. I had been so terrified of this boss fight, and then ended up beating them in under 3 minutes. Solaire did a great job there, especially with ensuring Dragon Slayer Ornstein went down fast, and then when it was down to one enemy, things were so much easier. I'd already figured out the Stray Demon earlier, and Lightning Charge Smough felt very similar to that fight, so I knew what I was doing. The only kind of stupid thing I did was charge in at the very end, but I saw Solaire was about to be vanquished, and I couldn't let my precious knight not savour him the victory with me. And I actually beat Ornstein and Smough! On the first try, and kind of quickly too. While Solaire definitely helped a lot, I think the main reason I was able to do that is because I've now mastered the basics of Dark Souls. Stuff like keeping your shield up, rolling away from big attacks, healing whenever you can, being patient rather than charging in. All of this stuff sounds straightforward, but this game really makes you learn it over and over again. With the strongest bosses in the game defeated, we now have access to Guinevere.
Thou hast journeyed far, and overcome much, chosen undead. Come hither, child. O chosen undead, I am Guinevere, daughter of Lord Gwyn and Queen of Sunlight. Since the day Father his form did obscureth, I have awaited thee. I bequeath the Lord Vessel to thee.
With the Lord Vestal in hand, I can now fast travel between some of the bonfires in-game, which is a pretty great reward to be granted. At this point, I guess there's only one thing left to do. Beat the game. Guess that'll be the next video in this series. If you did enjoy watching, please leave a like, subscribe, and consider becoming a Patreon supporter. These Dark Souls videos are a lot of work, but I absolutely love making them. The only reason I can afford to spend so many hours on projects like these is because of financial backing from my patrons, so thank you to all of you who support this channel. If you don't have the means to support financially, but still want to help out, then know that you can always share these videos with others, or click the like button and leave a comment. These things both help out a great deal, likely far more than you realise, so please like and comment whenever you watch a video you enjoy. That's going to be it from me for now, as I've got a lot more Dark Souls to go and play. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.